find out, and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. He's a spiritual coach and guide helping others remember their true nature and live in alignment with the divine, no other than Mr. Dylan Borland. Welcome, Mr. Dylan on Africa. Saying, can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Daniel, thank you so much for having me be a guest on your podcast, and thank you to your listeners. You've got a wonderful channel here, and I'd love to see it grow. So, a little bit about myself. Um, I am a coach over at the Caden Academy. In the Caden Academy, we call the School of Conscious Creation and Inner Transformation. And a lot of my work, Daniel, is in helping people remember who they are. And we can certainly get into that topic as well. But helping people move from living in an unconscious state of being into what we call conscious creation. And so many of us go through life on autopilot, feeling like we have no control over our outer world, like life's happening to us. We go through life almost sometimes as victims. But we help people remember that the power of creation, that the power to shape your outer world starts within, and to kind of wake back up to that feeling and take back control, take back the reins of your life and your outer world and become the conscious creators of it. And so a lot of my work is done in that capacity through the Caden Academy. And that's pretty much our focus, is helping people transform from the inside out.
And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Dylan. Thank you. And today let's talk about imagination creates reality, a self experiment in a conscious creation. So tell us, imagination creates reality. How does this process actually work on a practical day to day level? Is it about altering our perception, influencing our quantum field, or something else entirely?
Yeah. So in the book that I've written here called Imagination Creates Reality, it's kind of a good starting place to begin to experiment with this idea for yourself. And so, Daniel, you're probably familiar with, and many of your guests, many people talk about the concept of manifestation. I like to call it conscious creation. But if you really think about all that's occurring all around us, I always say that reality is what you believe it to be. And so, for example, if you believe yourself to be unlucky, reality is going to reflect back to you more circumstances where you're unlucky. If you believe yourself to be healed, we have plenty of examples and people throughout history that have been healed, right? And so if you take a step back and you look at all of what appears to be our outer world, you could ask, so much of it stems from what? Our imagination, right?
Mm,
Everything from the computer that we're on right now, to the microphone that we're speaking into, to the system that you're on, it all started in someone's imagination. They could see it before it transformed and got reflected back to them in the outer world. You can almost say that about literally everything that we experience in reality. And so when you begin to understand that and you ask yourself, where does that stem from? It really stems from our subconscious mind. And so our subconscious mind has the power to literally shape whatever we impress upon our subconscious mind, whatever we believe with the innermost conviction to be true will be reflected back to us, almost like a mirror. And one of the reasons why I titled this very short book, Imagination Creates Reality, the key word in it, Daniel, is a self-experiment in conscious creation. And because so many of us hear about manifestation or conscious creation or shaping our outer world through the power of our thoughts, but I wanted to distill what so many of these teachings talk about, both spiritual, both religious, you name it, into kind of its core essence. And so the book is called A Self-Experiment on purpose, because I don't want people just to listen to what I'm saying or what other people are saying. I want to give people practical steps, no matter what your religious background is or your spiritual beliefs are, to follow in a very short book. It's only 50 pages by design because I didn't fill it with fluff. I didn't fill it with stories. I wanted people to dive right into it and begin to test and begin to experiment for themselves how the power of your imagination, how the power of your subconscious mind will actually begin to shape your outer world. And so the book gives people, in 50 pages or less, very practical steps, and I'm happy to get into them for your audience as well too, on how to begin this experiment for themselves.
Go ahead, Mister. Go ahead, please. And let's say, what is the critical link between a vivid imagination and tangible result? Is it emotion, belief, action, or a specific state of mind and
Mm,
builds the bridge?
that's a great question. So for many years of my life, I was involved in all types of different spiritual practices, even religious practices, including Christianity and Catholicism. And I would sit and I would meditate like many people, and I would visualize or I would pray and I would ask God to help or answer my prayers. And a lot of times they would go unanswered for like many of us, right? They go unanswered. Things don't happen the way you want them to happen. And I spent so many years reflecting on what is, like you had just asked, what is that missing component? And I discovered that there's three components, and we talk about this in the book. When you kind of distill what a lot of the religious texts and spiritual leaders are telling you, when you distill it to its essence, there's three things that really kind of have to come together then for that outer world to be reflected to you. And the first one is imagination, right? So the power of your mind to visualize it, see it happening before it comes into the outer world. The second most important one, Daniel, and you've already kind of touched on this, is feeling. And that's kind of the cornerstone. Like if you're a mason and you're doing masonry work and you're building an ark, and they have that little cornerstone piece that kind of holds it all up. Feeling is a lot like that. So what I was missing all of those years in my life, especially growing up and through my teenage years and in my 20s, was it wasn't enough to just visualize in terms of manifesting or creating consciously what you want. Even in prayer, when people pray, it's not enough to just pray. You have to feel. That's the second component. And so feeling is a critical component in that. And then the third component is having faith. Having faith despite what everything in your outer world is telling you, despite that what it is that you're visualizing and feeling is not yet showing up, having faith that it will. Having faith in the unseen. And I give people a very practical way to experiment with that in the book, but I like to use an example. And so Neville Goddard, who's somebody who I've studied for a long time, used to teach, and so did Wayne Dyer and Alan Watts and other people. They used to say, you have to live as if your wish was fulfilled. Even in scripture and in Christian religion, they teach you, ask and it shall be given, right? And so you have to live and visualize it in a way as if you're not wanting, you're not hoping for it to be done, as if it has already been done. And so I'd like to give an example, very practical example. If you wanted a new job tomorrow, let's say you were looking for a new job, you wouldn't visualize yourself in your mind getting the process of the new job. You would visualize a short clip in your mind that would imply you already have that job. So for example, it might be just a very short clip you would visualize in your mind of a phone call, let's say with a friend who's congratulating you on your new job. And so it doesn't have to be long. You don't have to sit down and do hours of meditation and hours of visualization. You sit down in a relaxed state and you visualize a scene that would naturally occur as if it has already happened. So in this case, you've gotten your job. In your mind, you're seeing yourself sitting in your bedroom or in your office on that phone with your friend, and you hear them say to you, "Congratulations, Daniel or Dylan or whoever, on your new job." Because that scene has already implied that it is done. But then this is where you tie in the feelings. And so within that scene in your mind, you begin to feel it with all of your senses. You hear it. What's happening? What are the sounds around you? What is that voice of your friend? Feel the seat or the bed or wherever it is that you're at. Feel the temperature in the air. You begin to utilize all of your senses in that scene and you feel it. And that's the key component that I had missed for so long in my life, that when I got back to that through spiritual work, it was that cornerstone piece that brought it all together. It's not enough just to visualize that scene. You have to feel it. And then, like Neville used to teach, you keep that scene in your mind over and over. And this is where that faith comes into play. Because there's always a lag between your outer world and your inner world for it to show up. And so this is where your faith comes in, because all you need to do is, you don't have to know how it works or when it's going to happen. You just need to continue to hold that scene and that feeling in your mind until it shows up in your outer world. And it will. Sometimes it's quite literal. Sometimes it's very close to what you had imagined. But you can't concern yourself with the time, and that's where most people fall off. They lose faith. A month goes by, a week goes by, a year goes by, and they're not seeing it translate to their outer world. They begin to question, and they fall off a track. And so you really need those three components, both visualization, both that faith, and that feeling.
Indeed. So, Mr. Dillon, in your experiments, did you find it was more effective to imagine the precise outcome you desired, or the feeling of having already achieved it? And why?
Yeah, so you're really doing both, right? And so for me, there's countless times where quite literally, almost scene by scene, it shows up in my life. And then there's other times where it's very close to what I was imagining. But you have to do both. You have to have both that vivid visualization in those feelings, utilizing all of your senses combined, and continue to hold on to that.
What did your self experiment actually look like? Can you walk us through the step by step protocol you developed and tested on yourself?
Yeah, so it's basically identical to what I had just described. So you can take any scenario in your life. Like I had just got done talking this week about using the power of imagination to improve relationships. And so there was a time in my life where, I've been married twice and I don't want to be married again. I wanted to continue to figure out a way to improve my marriage. And so this is just fresh in my mind because I was just talking about it. But just to give you and your listeners an example, I would visualize myself in my relationship with my wife improving. And so one of the challenges that I would have, for example, in that relationship is I felt like I needed more help. I needed more help around the house. I needed more help with cooking and cleaning and dishes and things like that, because there's a lot on my plate as well, too. And so I would visualize in my mind a scene that implied my wife helping me more around the home with cooking and cleaning and dishes and kind of basic household chores and things like that. And this is something that I had always wanted to happen. And I said, well, let me use the power of my imagination to bring this about. And sure enough, it didn't take months or years or decades to happen, but very shortly, in a few weeks, my outer world started to match my inner world, and these things started to happen just as I had visualized them. And so I just use that as an example because it's something that I just talked about this week as well. But I go through every day of my life using my imagination to bring about, for example, like these podcasts. A month ago, I started visualizing I wanted to do podcasts again because it had been some time, 2018, since I had done podcasts last. I said, well, let me visualize myself and feel it as it's already done, being on the podcast, talking, the chair, the lights, the microphone, the interactions, feel it with all of my senses. And sure enough, it's come to be. And so now I do 2 or 3 podcasts a week. And so you can use it for every different thing that you're trying to work on within your life. And it's like a muscle. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. At first, it's very difficult. You wouldn't go to the gym and just start lifting 50 pounds right out of the gate. You would start with 5 and then work your way up to 10 and 20 and 30 and so on. But the more you continue to do it, the easier and easier it gets. And then it just becomes habitual, just becomes a way of life. And you use it for everything.
In everything, indeed. So, how do you measure your success rate? What it would be the speed of manifestation, the size of the result, or the consistency?
So I don't generally concern myself with the success rate, because if you're concerned with the success rate, whether it's going to happen or not, or how fast it's going to happen, then you're telling yourself that you don't fully have that inner conviction. And so when you have that full inner conviction that what it is you desire will translate into your outer world, you rest in that faith. And so you don't concern yourself with the timing of it happening. You don't concern yourself with how fast it might happen. You rest in that faith and trust that it will unfold on its own timing. And what generally happens, if we want to discuss timing a little bit, generally the thing that allows your, see, our outer world is always a reflection of our innermost beliefs and thoughts. And generally what happens in terms of timing is that if it's not showing up as quick as you would like it to show up, then there's usually something still in that subconscious mind that is creating doubt. And so the important thing here, when we talk about people who have been successful with conscious creation and manifestation, is you have to have that unwavering conviction that it is done. You can't have any ounce of doubt. And now it takes time to get yourself, the more experiences you have, that faith continues to build. But I like to use an analogy of because I spent a lot of time gardening. So it's like when you garden, if anybody has gardened before, you know that when you plant a seed in the soil, you don't go back and continue to dig that seed up, right? You don't go back and check and say, hey, are you growing? Are you going to grow? Are you okay? Do you need some more water? You don't, because you would kill the seed. And so this process of manifestation, conscious creation is a lot like that, where you plant that seed and you have faith that that seed will sprout and turn into, let's say, a head of cabbage or a corn stalk. And you let it be and you rest in that faith. You don't concern yourself when that corn stalk's going to show up, how it's going to show up, why it showed up. You just rest in that faith. And so what you don't want to do, and what we often do, and this is where faith really comes in, is when you start questioning, then you've already gone back to square zero, because you've now re-implemented doubt in your mind. And just to give you another example to illustrate this, I often use a scenario like a medical scenario. If people are diagnosed and they're told by the doctor, you've got 6 months to live, and they start making plans for their passing away, oftentimes you'll see examples of people passing away almost quite literally within 6 months. But then you can also see examples of people who have said to themselves, no, I don't believe that in any capacity. They have that deep inner conviction that they will live, that they will survive, that they will be healed, and they go on to live decades more. And so what's happening there? It's that inner conviction. It's that deep inner conviction and trust and that faith. And that's really what you need. So you don't want to question the timing of it.
Mr. Dylan, are we responsible for unconsciously creating our negative realities like illness or hardship? How do you approach this without falling into self blame?
Yeah. Neville Goddard used to say that you're creating either way. You're creating subconsciously, not thinking about it. Unconsciously is a better word, not subconsciously. You're creating unconsciously, or you're creating consciously. And part of the work that I do is helping people remember, some people might call it awakening, to the fact that you are the creator, that the power of God is within you, that you are God expressing himself, all things are possible. And take back and wake up from that unconscious creating, because the subconscious mind, if we really look at kind of what's happening here on a biological level, the subconscious mind doesn't care what you impress upon it. You have your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is really what shapes your outer world. And it does it by your innermost beliefs. And so a lot of us grow up and are indoctrinated. Our culture, our family, the community in which we live in. You might have grown up and be told, hey, you're not smart enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not good enough. You'll never succeed. Be a dentist, be a doctor, be an attorney. All of these things that you have grown up and have forgotten have gotten impressed upon your subconscious mind. And then you go through your life and they're reflected back to you. So when you had asked, yes, most of us are still going through life with all of these things that have been impressed upon our subconscious mind unknowingly for many people, that are literally being reflected back to you unknowingly as you go through your life. And so when you begin to remember and wake back up that you are in control of that process, then you can change a lot of what's been impressed upon that subconscious mind as truth and recontextualize it and redo it in a way that you are now in control. So you move from being in the back seat of the car as a passenger to taking control of the wheel. And so everything that you're experiencing, you're either is being reflected back to you either unconsciously or consciously. For most people right now, it's still unconscious.
And Mr. Dylan, the altered state of being, how has living by this principle changed your fundamental experience of life? Do you feel more like a victim of circumstances or the author of your story?
Yeah, definitely. You move from being the victim, which so many of us go through life feeling like life is happening to us. We have no control until you remember that everything that's happening to you is in your control. And then life gets fun. And so you move away from, so many of us go through life and we feel like life is happening to us. This person hurt us. The government is to blame. Politics are to blame. This person's to blame. And you move out of these states of fear. You move out of these states of depression. You move out of these states of anxiety and all of these things and all this struggle that we feel as human beings. And you move into a state of alignment where you're no longer having to force life into existence and bend and pull and struggle and fight. And if you look at how everything kind of is outside of the human experience is happening, nature is just existing. It's not forcing. It's not bending. It's not pulling. It's just being. It's an alignment. And so you move into alignment with everything else in creation. It's really kind of this human experience where we have forgotten that we are the creators. You know, Alan Watts used to say, you are both the dream and the dreamer, but we've forgotten that. And he has a wonderful lecture in which he did where he describes life and how we go through it as like actors in a play. And many of us have got so consumed and identified in that role, whatever it is that we're playing, that we have forgotten that this is play, this is creation. And when you remember that and you begin to have these experiences for yourself and you begin to become the conscious creator of your life, it now becomes play again. And you move into alignment and opportunities come to you where you before might have had to force those or felt like you had to force those, but they began to flow to you. Opportunities, abundance, happiness, joy. If we remember life, I have a quote that I like to say. We always keep saying here, life is like a mirror. If you envision a mirror in front of you right now and you smile into that mirror, you're going to get a smile back. If you frown into that mirror, you're going to get a frown back. And so on and so on. And so you move into this state of where life is no longer such a struggle, like so many of us, and I myself had experienced for many decades, into the natural flow and natural alignment. And it just creates more peace, more self-control. You realize that you are the driver. You're not in the backseat anymore. You have the power, you have the control to shape everything that you see in the outer world. And it just creates more peace in people's lives generally.
More peace indeed. And to wrap up our discussion for today, Mr. Dylan, if you could have a very reader takeaway or viewers to practice just one thing of your self experiment, what would it be?
Yeah, so I think the simplest thing to practice, and we talk about that in the book, is we have people go through what's called the ladder exercise. And so you spend 2 or 3 days. This is kind of your first experiment in conscious creation. You spend 2 or 3 days going around your home and writing on a sticky note, "I will not climb a ladder." And you post that everywhere. And that's your your conscious mind reading that. And then as you lay down and go to bed, you do kind of what we talked about in the beginning of this episode, and you do the opposite. Now, this is where your subconscious mind, which is the creation powerhouse, comes into play. And as you're drifting off to sleep, you create a scene in your mind where you're visualizing yourself climbing up and down a ladder. You're putting all of your senses into that, the sound, the feel, the touch. And you do that for a couple nights as you drift off to sleep. And then at some point within a few days or a week or so, you're usually going to run into a scenario where you are quite literally climbing a ladder, or there's ladders that appear in your life in some sense. And that's kind of the very first toe in the water that you can ask yourself and say, hey, if I can do this, what else can I do with the power of my mind? And we encourage people to start very, very small and then build from there.
Well, Mr. Dylan, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your business, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Absolutely, and thank you for asking, Daniel. So if anybody wants to expand on this concept a little bit further, take a little deeper dive, I always invite you to join me at the cadenacademy.com. That's CADEN, cadenacademy.com. And really the best place to start is either with that book, that Self-Experiment in Conscious Creation, which you can get right there on the homepage, or join our brand new 12-week Inner Transformation course. And the first 3 weeks are completely for free to get your kind of toes dipped in the water. So that would be a great place to start.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Dylan Borland, because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering advocacy like this to come. So, Mr. Dylan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank your listeners.
Monica, people, see you soon.